and welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have an incredible guest, Rob Cressy. Rob is an entrepreneur, a master creator, and speaker. It is my absolute honor to welcome Rob Cressy.
Courtney, super excited to be jamming with you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Rob. I do have to let the audience know the way that I found Rob was on LinkedIn, and the focus was positivity. As soon as I went on your LinkedIn account, Rob, I saw you were all about positive energy. So I definitely wanted to reach out and see if I could have you on the podcast. So, Rob, why don't we first begin with a brief introduction and a background of yourself, and maybe even include that positive energy too.
Yes, and that is exactly why I wanted to come on this, because like attracts like. It's very simple for me that at the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey 12 years ago, when I'm sitting there at zero, no website, no money, no clients, no anything, I asked myself a single question. What's going to help me accomplish my goals faster? Positivity or negativity? Positivity, of course, negativity is going to slow me down and take me further away from where I want to go. Therefore, this became a binary equation for me, a 1 or a 0. I'm all about positivity, and negativity is a 0. It does not exist in my life. It doesn't mean I don't have bad days or fears or judgments or self-limiting beliefs, but it means that when I wake up every single day, it is from the lens of positivity. And on my wall right here is a picture that hangs that says, happiness is not a destination, it's a way of life. And it's a very important thing because for me, I truly do see positivity. Radiate positivity is one of my core values, but this is a mindset, a lifestyle in a way of being, because it will create, one, more of what I want in my life, and attracted you into my life. And then number two, it gives me the opportunity to shine my light on others and make the world a better place. So I'll give with no expectation of receiving. And of course, when you put out good, good is going to come back. So that's foundational to who I am. I'm a coach around self-development, artificial intelligence, and brand building, all unique things. And I never set out to become a coach. I just lived like one for more than a decade until I started to get hired to help people be better at business by being better at life.
That is wonderful. Thank you for that introduction, Rob. Just to expand upon who you are as a person, I noticed on your website you have 8 core values. Of course, one being radiating positivity, which of course you just went over. But I'm curious if maybe you could just walk us through those 8 values. How did you come up with those 8 values?
So, great question. The reason I put it on my About page and it's on my LinkedIn overview is because of how foundational it is to who I am. And especially living in this Chat GPT world that we do right now, we can over-optimize things, or everyone can start to sound very similar in things. And I want to get to the core of what courses through me in my DNA. And it's very important because you will learn so much more about who I am just by the core values that I share. So number 1 is radiating positivity in all that I do. Number 2, always learning. And for me, this came from the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. I was not self-aware and I did not have a growth mindset. But on that very first day of entrepreneurship, I'm sitting there, no one to tell me what to do. Do I work out? Who do I call? Anything. I was like, oh my God, everything is on me. This is unbelievable. And it's when I realized, oh my God, this is what self-awareness is. And nobody ever told me what that was. And then the growth mindset happened because I kept hearing the average CEO reads 60 books a year. I was reading 0. So I saw my dreams on the other side of me learning how to read. Of course, I went to college and I knew how to read. I had just never learned or read in a way that was aligned with what I wanted to create in my life. So I created a reading routine where the first thing that I've done every day for 12 years in a row, weekends included, is read a book for 30 minutes first thing in the morning. Because it guarantees I'm better today than I was yesterday. So no matter what happens in business, the number 1 asset is myself. No one can ever take from me what I learn. So always learning. The next thing, number 3, extreme ownership. And this is all around accountability. So when you come from this place of self-awareness, you're like, whoa, everything is on me. That's unbelievable. I can design my life. But then there's the, okay, now I'm not going to buy into the excuses for the why not. Let me take ownership of every aspect of my life. The next thing I mentioned this to you before we started recording is yes and. I've got a background in improv and comedy writing from Second City in Chicago. And the foundational pillar to improv is building upon others' ideas, not tearing them down. So in all that I do, I'm looking to be a yes and, a force multiplier, where on this show together with you and I, man, my goal is to make you look so good, to make this the best podcast episode you've ever done. Now imagine just radiating those things in all that you do. The next one that I have, live in action. And this is around all areas of your life. And the way they like to say is stacking ones over zeros. This isn't about hustle culture. This is all aligned towards what you want more of in your life. Because the next part of this, which is sort of a yes and living in action, is to be relentless in the pursuit of excellence and what sets your soul on fire. Because I know what it's like to live a decade of my life not enjoying waking up every single day to slinging banner ads and text links. So 2 more remaining. The next one, do what's right. I grew up in a very conservative Christian family in Pittsburgh, and every day before I would leave, my dad would always say, hey, Rob, do what's right. And it's foundational to who I am and how I operate, both with just talking with people like you, but the way that I do business. That honesty and integrity and doing things the right way sounds simple, sounds obvious, but we both know we've run into instances in which people do not do things the right way. So kind of important to be like, hey guys, just so you know, I do things the right way around over here. And then the last thing here is talk with candor. That I want you to talk to me the same way that I would talk to you. So if I have something in my teeth, hey Rob, we have something in your teeth. But with me as a coach, it's actually very important because I have the permission and space to say things to you or to my clients in a way where I'm coming from love. It's not, I'm here to hurt your feelings. Like, listen, we're all in the name of growth. So candor can be very refreshing because very rarely in life do we have people around us who will actually tell us how things are.
Well, thank you so much for that, Rob. And I think all those values have so much truth to them. And I think that's a wonderful foundation too, to build your life upon, literally. And as we move forward, when I was doing research for this conversation, and it kind of transitions very smoothly into this next topic of discussion, but you really focus on what is called a vivid vision. And I would love for you to explain to the audience what exactly a vivid vision is.
So the vivid vision was the greatest thing that I created a little bit more than a year ago. And it was inspired by Cameron Herold's book, appropriately named Vivid Vision. And this is all around creating a 3-year vision for yourself. And as somebody who is a high performer and an entrepreneur, I know all about goal setting. We have SMART goals and all of that. But here's the thing. SMART goals never really related to me as a creative. I understand being specific and time-bound and doing all of those things. And it can work on a daily or a weekly or a monthly basis. But when it comes to a 3-year vision, I was always very challenged in creating both that emotional connection as well as that accountability. Because 3 years can be far off into the distance. But so often the SMART goalness or the LinkedIn-ness of long-term goal setting is like, listen, set your goals for 3 years out and then make them 1-year goals and then make it 12 one-month goals and then make it 4 weekly goals and then make it a goal every single week. I'm like, cool, I got it. That makes sense. But if something is 3 years in the distance, it's very easy to kick the can down the road being like, I didn't do it today or this week. It's all good. And then you look up 9 months later and you're like, I haven't touched this thing. But I kept hearing once again about the power of having a clear vision. And there's layers to this and levels to this game, because as a self-development coach, I very much believe in visualization. I believe in living in your imagination. And the more clear your vision, the greater our opportunity is to, one, be your future self now. Great book by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. But then number two, when you know where you're going, now you can both be that person and take those actions. So Cameron Herold's book gave a really good framework for this. And I had to read the book twice to actually execute upon it. And I know I'm certainly not alone in this. How many of us have read something and be like, boom, I totally vibe with this. And then you don't actually do what it says in the book to create the results, right? I would like to say, if we're going to use the Pareto principle, it's definitely more than the 80-20 rule. It's probably like 95-5. 95% of people don't do anything, 5% do. But when I read it, it resonated so much with me. But what were my excuses? Well, I've got a 2-year-old toddler running a full-time business. I just started another one. All of the reasons why I did not commit to investing in creating this clarity of vision. So I said, listen, I'm done not being this guy. There's this thing that I know lights me up. I'm so excited about it. I just did not take action on it. So I then reread the book with the intention of, I am doing exactly what this says in the book because I want this thing. Because I love being an outlier, doing the things that nobody else does. And it took me about 3 months to put the thing together. From, all right, let's just take all of the ideas we have in our mind in creating the categories for our life. So my wife, my son, exploration and play, well-being and health, my entrepreneurial harmony, how I feel. All right, I got those categories there. Then I'm like, all right, give myself the gift of brainstorming and all of these. Hey, 3 years from now, what would I love to create? There is no ceiling on all of this. And that's another part of this vivid vision. We can cap our ceiling for what we believe is possible versus, boom, let me just go ahead and dream and just create that there. So I went ahead and did that. And the beautiful part of a vivid vision is it brings imagery into things. So a lot of people can tell you their dream. Can you show me your dream? Can I give you a document like I sent you right before this conversation? I was like, hey, Courtney, here's my vivid vision. So it's a living, breathing document. And knowing that, you sit there and you're like, all right, I've created this thing. But then a new self-limiting belief pops up. You're like, well, how do I be the person that goes and flies on private jets and has a private chef and goes and does all of these amazing things that are in the 3-year vision? Because now, once again, you jump back into the either the scarcity or the how do I. And here's what you learn by going through the whole process, is that creating your vivid vision is an opportunity for you to be this person and live this way now. It is not about the end result. Yes, we have the clarity of where we're going. So I was like, all right, for somebody who actually makes their 3-year vivid vision happen, what would that person actually be doing? So I'm not just, once again, redoing the thing that I just didn't do and creating the original vivid vision. I was like, man, someone would read this every single day. I was like, oh, totally. So I made this the very first thing that I read every single morning. I was like, listen, if I'm going to be putting chips on the table, I am going to read this 1,096 times in the next 3 years. And I was like, well, if I'm doing this once in the morning, why don't I just read this again at night before I go to bed? Because we all know oftentimes what you consume before bed, your mind works on. So I'm like, I can live in my vision twice a day. It might only take 7 minutes each time. So now I've got a process for both clarity of vision, awareness, as well as being that person. And on an everyday basis, when I'm doing things like, for example, on there is going to Disney with my son, and going to the beach, or playing sports with him. Anytime I'm at the beach now, I'm like, oh my God, I'm living my 3-year vivid vision. So it's no longer this thing that's so far in the distance that you can't relate to. You can actually be it and live it right now.
No, I love that. And I think one thing that really stood out when you did send it over was It encompasses your whole life, not just strictly your career. And the one thing, not so much a vivid vision. I've never honestly heard that until now, which I think so enlightening. But I would do vision boards, so kind of, I guess, similar. But I think when I saw yours, to write something out, to not just have pictures and maybe a couple quotes, but truly think through what you want to even manifest, to your point, within those 3 years. That's what really caught my attention. And also, you mentioned that you have a son too, and obviously, family, wife. How does that, because you do so much, obviously, as an entrepreneur, you have so many businesses, podcasts too. How do you balance all of that?
It's why I call it a lifestyle, because I am doing all of this, one, because it's my dream, but as part of my dream, it is to live and create and provide for my family. So one of the things that I have, I'm very systems and process oriented, because I wasn't always this person 12 years ago. So I've got a boot sequence for how I start my day. And the very first thing is my purpose. My purpose in life is to be a positive force for good that leads my son Maverick to what is possible. So boom, I'm getting that drip every single day so they can be the inspiration behind why I'm doing these things. I can empower them by being the mirror for my son. And to me, that's what's so exciting for me about a vivid vision, is creating what's possible for him, not to become Rob, but to be like, hey, you can do or be or create anything you want, because look at what your dad is doing and you can do anything as well.
No, that's wonderful. And I think that's what's always so curious, like I'm always so curious about, is just finding balance between life, career, and then also I do want to mention sport, because when I was on your website, I really like how you break down Rob's day, so to speak, within like a pie chart. And you were certainly involved in many sports. So could you maybe just explain how sport has positively impacted your life and maybe even into your career?
Sports was my original dream. I love sports. There is very few people on earth that you will find that loves sports as much as me. For anybody watching this, behind me is a wallpaper of baseball, basketball, and football cards that are all of my cards that I collected from when I was a kid. So as I became an on-camera host, I would always notice when watching ESPN, the reporters looked like they were in like a Motel 6 bedroom. I'm like, man, the background just looks terrible. And one of my marketing principles is everything you do is a reflection of your brand. So they're sitting there and they look and they're in some janky hotel room. And I'm like, all right, well, I want to bring my dreams to life. So I'm like, well, I got these trash bags of cards. Why don't I just create baseball card wallpaper? And my original dream 12 years ago was to be a full-time creator and get paid to talk about sports for a living. And a mentor said something to me that changed my life. He goes, Rob, if you ever hope to get paid to do what you love, you better be doing it already. So I was like, all right, how in the world do you get paid to talk about sports for a living? Well, number one, and this is a long time ago, you should have a podcast so that you're talking about sports. And I should teach myself how to be a host and how to be on camera. And since I'm a bootstrapped entrepreneur, I'm going to have to teach myself audio and video editing, social media marketing, brand building. Essentially, building a media company was on the other side of creating my dreams of getting paid to talk about sports for a living. And I ended up turning a sports blog into a sports marketing company where we helped brands market to sports fans, because who better to help them market to someone than their ideal demographic themselves?
Wow. So I'm assuming, was that Bacon Sports?
It was. So I did that for a decade. And then, it's not in the entrepreneurship handbook that you can be all in on your dreams and build a marketing agency for a decade. And you wake up one day and it's about to be March Madness in 2 days. And the world stops. And here comes COVID. And now the world of sports is gone. And I just built the last 10 years of my life around helping brands market to sports fans. And while we were not doing professional sports in arena stuff, it was still all around communicating to sports fans. And it was a pivotal moment in my journey. I loved it. I've given everything. I was known as Bacon Sports Rob, Rob the sports guy. And I've always had the gift of being forward thinking. I saw the writing on the wall. The first gift for me was it was easier for me to build a marketing agency than it was trying to get a job at ESPN. At least when you look at how do I get paid to talk about sports, I'll just create my own thing as opposed to somebody else trying to hire me. It ended up being a blessing because when COVID hit, everybody who had a job in sports, a large majority of them got laid off and their jobs no longer existed. Thank God I've been running my own thing. But then number two became, I saw what the next year of business was going to look like. Brand budgets were going to go down. There was no games on TV. So it was going to be a significant uphill battle, even though at the time I was hosting a sports betting podcast for a company. So I'm legitimately living my dreams talking about sports betting. And if you were to choose which industry in sports you would want to put your chips on, sports betting is the one. The only one where it's becoming legalized in the United States. And I sat there and I was talking to my web designer who's become a friend of mine. And he'd always said, Rob, you're just so good at this self-development side of things. That's just like naturally for my brand, I would always share my lessons from my entrepreneurial journey because I'd created such a level of self-awareness and invested in my personal growth so often. I would just naturally share, hey, this is what's going through my mind as an entrepreneur and how this can help you. And that's when the decision was made to step into the true calling and purpose in my life of being a coach. And it was a very foreign thing for me that I had to actually do some internal work on calling myself a coach because I never set out to do it. I just lived that way. And COVID was that opportunity that said, hey, this industry is going the other direction. Now it's time for you to go back to zero again and build back up the thing that can help more people in their life.
That is incredible. And I think just like at a larger picture too, you had also worked in corporate for over a decade before getting into entrepreneurship. And I would love to pick your brain just as you would journey through becoming an entrepreneur. What did that look like? Like if somebody's listening right now and they want to start their own business or even start their own podcast, what are maybe some tips or maybe even challenges that you eventually overcame? But if you could give advice to somebody just starting out, what would that be, Rob?
My 10 years of corporate America were some of the most challenging of my entire life because I was not doing what I wanted.
Yeah.
I had a degree in marketing from Miami of Ohio University, very good university, and my dream was to work for an ad agency and be creative and brainstorm and coming up with ideas. I'm like, hey, that's what marketing is. And I was unemployed for a year and a half after graduating from college, lived off my credit card, and I was as broke as you could get. I was in debt. I was paying rent off my credit card. I would do anything. And of course, it doesn't mean I was sitting there doing nothing. This is, you're on Career Builder and Monster.com. You're just trying to apply to every job as a 21-year-old kid. And finally, I got my very first job at a Fifth Third Bank call center in Cincinnati, Ohio, making $10 an hour as an inbound call center rep selling home equity loans. I had a computer with no internet access or email, and I was just sitting there in a queue for them. I would wake up and show up 7 minutes late, so it was 8 minutes would be the wrong number, so 7 minutes the most, and I would leave 7 minutes early, and I would live for the weekends. And every single day, I hated going to work. So that was my entire life. And my next decade of corporate America was flipping jobs that either paid more or had a shorter commute. So it was like, all right, once I got at Fifth Third Bank, I worked at a auto auction, which paid me more money as a marketing manager. But now I'm driving an hour each way. So then I took a job, speaking of the world of sports, that I got because I'm from Pittsburgh originally, and my email address at the time was the Ohio Steelers fan at yahoo.com. And the guy interviewing me is a Steelers fan. So we ended up just talking about Pittsburgh sports for the first hour, where he finally says, listen, we have to actually talk about the job side of things. I get the job on the very first day. I didn't even know what I was doing. I didn't care. All I knew was it was paying more money, it was a shorter commute. But that's what got me into online advertising. And eventually I was a sales rep in that. And I got very good at it. I was very good at selling digital advertising, banner ads, text links, how to monetize websites. But I would sit there and I would always dream of, man, imagine the person who gets to wake up every single day and just write and create around sports for a living. This is before video and live stream. This is the sports blog era. So I would write sports blogs half the time while I'm doing my other job. So I'm literally mailing it in and being the best at my job at the same time, until I got to the point where I said, I would regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't give it a shot at making my dreams happen. Because I sat there and I audited the sports landscape, and I was like, I'm as good or better than every piece of content that I see. And to me, the bigger risk was not taking the risk at all. So I cut the cord, burned the boats, and went all in.
No, I love that. And not to go too much off on a tangent, but my family's actually from Pennsylvania. And so they're huge Steeler fans. So
look at that. Look at what we attracted all around the power of positivity. It's a good day to be a Steelers fan.
I have to agree with you about, I had wrote a blog relatively recently, but really taking the jump to bring your dreams to reality and not being afraid, because I've said this before, but when even starting my business, starting a podcast, the one thing that I was starting to think about is, if I put myself 5 years into the future and I look back and I think, okay, if I didn't start that, how would I feel at that present moment? And most of the time, I know I would regret not doing something, and whatever that may be. Like I said, in this case, just a business. But I do think that's so important to shed more light on, because I do believe there's so much human potential out there just waiting to be discovered, and waiting for that individual to take that jump, and then obviously bringing their dreams to reality. So I agree with you 100%. And speaking of entrepreneurship, you currently are a co-founder of Unlimited Coach. So I would love for you to maybe explain why did you start Unlimited Coach, and maybe what influenced you to go in that direction?
I love how yes, Andy, this entire conversation is, because you're going to see so many themes that build on top of each other. And once again, the gift of being forward thinking. So I wanted to get paid to talk about sports for a living. So I started a podcast. Now I've published over 1,000. And for the first 5 years, people thought I was speaking hieroglyphics. They're like, podcast, what are you talking about? Now it's just like of course everybody has a podcast. Back then, I'm trying to sell it. Like, people would ask, how do you do it? So I've always been the gift of forward thinking. So in November 2022, a friend texted me the first week that Chat GPT is out in beta. He's like, hey, Rob, check out this thing called Chat GPT. Within the very first minute of using it for the very first time, I felt like I just used the internet for the first time. Immediately, I saw what the next 10 years of business looked like, and I was like, I'm all in. 1 whole minute is all it took for me to get all in. And on Twitter, I would see people talking about it, and they're like, oh my God, you can create a blog post that sounds like Mickey Mouse. And I'm like, how do I turn $1 into $1.50? I'm an entrepreneur. So immediately a superpower for me became, I saw this as a tool for business growth. So when everybody else is saying, oh my God, it told me that George Washington went to the moon, this thing sucks, I'm like, completely irrelevant. How's this going to help me make $1 million? So all of the reasons why not to became positive for me, because that meant fewer people were actually going to be doing it. But I was like, that's irrelevant to me. You guys have completely misplaced focus on how this can be powerful. So once I started using it, I legitimately felt like it was magic. I'm already a master creator where I love to create as many ways as possible, create positive impact. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, you're telling me this is $0 and this thing creates magic? And immediately I'm like, all right, let's see what this thing can do. I'm going to try and break this. And as part of my entrepreneurial journey, one of the things that I was paid to do was to create social media strategies for brands and sports, because a lot of companies do social, but very few of them actually have a written document that says, here's our pillar categories, here's our brand voice, here's our content schedule. In doing so would traditionally take me about a month, and I would get paid $5,000 to do it. So I got in there and Chat GPT, I'm like, let's see what it can do. And I was like, let's create a social media strategy for, and I just made something up. And it goes, do. And I was like, oh my God. I used to get paid $5,000 in 1 month, and this thing did this in about 38 seconds. And I was like, this is unbelievable. So now I'm just like pushing the limits. I'm like, what about this? What about this? What about this? So I just started, one, using it relentlessly. I was like, I can't believe this is real. Legitimately, on an entrepreneurial journey, there's so often, this is life in general, but you sometimes, well, often, we can't control life, right? We have plans and God's like, oh, funny, that's what you think is going to happen. Boom, something else totally happens. So you do everything the right way, but you haven't gotten to where you are yet. You've got your vivid vision, you've got all of this stuff going on. And then one day, God is like, by the way, I'm going to drop some magic in your lap. Boom. And so many people would say, if I was only around when YouTube or Facebook or Google Ads were invented, I would make so much money. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, yo, this is that thing. So I just started, I created a Facebook group and started sharing how I was using Chat GPT. And at that time, I did a Google search. And I just Googled Chat GPT coach, Chat GPT mastermind, Chat GPT course, Chat GPT training. And guess what I found?
What, Rob?
0 things on the entire internet around somebody coaching somebody else around Chat GPT. So immediately I started a brand new business all around helping entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business leaders leverage Chat GPT for business growth. And of course, save more time, be more effective, be more efficient, be more creative, do more with less faster. So I'm living in this world and I'm doing this on the one-on-one coaching side of things with businesses. I've been doing it in group coaching as well. And at the time, a former coach of mine who I was still friends with, he was doing the same thing. He's based in the UK. He was doing the exact same thing. And I hit him up and I was like, man, I feel like we missed the boat that you and I literally both went all in on AI and Chat GPT, but not together. And that's when the light bulb went off. We're like, hey, what if you and I just have a call once a week where we create back and forth and just share what we're sharing. So we did about 30 weeks in a row. And then we're like, well, what if we just created something together? He's like, I would love to do that, Rob. So I was like, all right, now we're going to build a brand new business together. So we asked ourselves one question. Actually 2 questions. If we had to sell 3 customers in the next 48 hours, how would we do it? And then we asked, where do we have an unfair advantage? And you know what our answer was? AI in self-development. He and I were both self-development coaches for more than a decade, or we lived that life. We had both been coaching for AI the last 2 years. And we sat there and were like, if we were going to be putting roulette chips, which we are, in our business or leading others, where would we recommend they do it? Well, number 1, obviously, invest in yourself with self-development. And then number 2, obviously, invest in your business with AI and Chat GPT. And we looked around and we're like, is there anybody else combining self-development and AI at the same time? So that's how we created Unlimited Coach. And here's the fun part. How in the world did we even create that name? In shipping as quickly as we could. We didn't care about branding. We called this Rob and Colin Unlimited, just as our moniker for how we talked about it. Like, all right, next call. What do we do with Rob and Colin Unlimited? And then it's like, all right, now we got to get a website and a sales page. What are we going to do? And we're like, well, what if we just drop it and just call it Unlimited? And that just turned into Unlimited Coach.
That is unbelievable. And there's so many things that I took from what you just said. I mean, just even big picture, I think one thing that attracts me to entrepreneurship is always the uncertainty of what tomorrow can bring. And in your case, what is so inspiring is how you jump from kind of like one industry and you see trends starting to form. Where could those trends potentially go into the future, and how you jump onto that train? Even before we jumped on this conversation, I was doing some research on Chat GPT, and it's so interesting what you were saying. Chat GPT had 1 million users within the first 5 days of being available. And this was on a Forbes article. And so I really would love to dive more into Chat GPT, AI, obviously with your expertise. So is there anything, even when you are coaching people, businesses, to maybe be aware of if they're beginners for Chat GPT?
For anybody listening or watching right now, I'm going to highly recommend you take notes on what I'm about to say, because I am going to make you $1 million. I'm serious, because nobody else is going to tell you this stuff. So, number one, ChatGPT, free versus paid. Pay $20 for the paid version. Why? Because you're going to get the most up-to-date technology, and this is all about do you use it or not. If you're not using ChatGPT, this is an irrelevant conversation. If you're vibing how Courtney and I are getting down, even if you're starting at zero, just trust me. $20 is a small price to pay to get the most powerful tool ever created in the history of the universe. So use the paid version. You'll have access to the most up-to-date technology. Number two, and almost nobody will ever tell you this, and it will completely change the way you use ChatGPT forever. So when you use it, I want you to click your little profile picture in either the top right, or if you're on the app, below there. And there's a thing that's going to say Customize GPT. And you click on that in your settings, and a little window is going to pop up. There's going to be 2 boxes. And Courtney, I'll send you the link to this, whether you want to include it in the show notes or just for yourself. And it'll say, what do you want ChatGPT to know about you? And then below it says, how would you like ChatGPT to respond? And one of the biggest challenges people run into is, why does this sound like a robot, or why is it so generic? Because foundational to using ChatGPT like a pro is giving it context. So you can go into your custom instructions and say, and answer these questions. Number 1, who am I? Number 2, what do I do for my business? Number 3, who is my target demographic? Number 4, what is my brand voice? AKA, what do I sound like? 5 or 10 keywords of what Rob and Courtney, when we're talking. He is positive, personable, witty yet brain safe, can take large concepts and make them small. He's wise. Why? Now you're not just sounding like anybody else, it sounds like you. So with this, now ChatGPT is coming from the lens of, in my example, Rob is a personal growth, high performance, and AI coach, helping people be their best, do what they love, and show up powerfully. Like Tony Robbins, Ed Milet, and Wayne Dyer. He helps them build better habits, routines, mindsets, lifestyles, and ways of being to create all they want in their life. And ChatGPT understands this language. So now, moving forward, on every prompt that I create, it is coming from, this is who Rob is. Does that make sense, Courtney?
Absolutely. I think something that's so interesting that I would love to learn more about with your business here, when people do come to you just in a broader sense, not necessarily relating to understanding Chat GPT better or just AI in general, but more of that brand building and just personal development. What are maybe some challenges that you've seen with clients who come, and maybe providing a specific piece of advice or just advice in general?
So I'll answer this in a backwards way. Remember, I'm not trained as a coach, so I never set out to do this. I just live this way. So I don't have all these accreditations and everything, but that actually makes me even more powerful because I am the biggest champion for you and your vision. So I don't have to do a single second of preparation before any call because I just ask one question. Hey, Courtney, what would you love to create today? And you can take this anywhere. Hey, Rob, I want to get better with Chat GPT. Or, hey, Rob, I'm working on this marketing campaign for my business. I can't figure this out. Or, hey, Rob, I'm having some challenges in this relationship. Or I've noticed my self-talk is a little bit negative and I don't like that. And we'll just be in conversation and start peeling the onion. Because one of the blessings of working with someone like me is I have a lot of experience in not being this person, in living in my fears, my judgments, my self-limiting beliefs, my scarcity mindset, my living in lack. So for Coaching 101, for me, it's all about experience in terms of lived experience, not, oh, you have this accreditation. No, because I've built brands for myself and others for more than a decade. I've developed myself for more than a decade, and I've been using AI for as long as we've been able to in the public. So the biggest challenge is for anybody on the self-development side, and I would think of this in terms of levels to this game, it's really going to be about doing the inner work. And it's amazing, Courtney, when you and I can live in vision, but also part of vision is where you are not being. What am I not seeing? What is holding me back? And the biggest thing that I can say that has changed my life and that of my clients is being aware of and designing the story you are telling yourself. So the biggest thing that limits almost every single person, whether they're a client of mine or not, is a story that you tell yourself because we live in our heads, right?
Yeah.
Which is why a vivid vision is so powerful. Because if I read my vivid vision every single morning, boom, drip, 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 positive seeds, positive seeds. This is who I am. This is where I'm going. So I'm designing positive self-talk to speak to what your podcast is about. So it's designed positivity in there. But then you wake up and you go to work and you turn on the news or social media or email, and all of a sudden the world just starts shooting arrows at you. And now your get-to-do list starts becoming even bigger, so you're overwhelmed, or you're stuck, or you're uncertain, or you're not sure what to do next. Does that sound kind of familiar?
Yes, I
Great.
think we've all
That's why someone like me comes in as a coach to say, hey, I'm here to create, one, a safe space for us to have this conversation. So for a lot of people, the big thing is, am I even willing to work with someone like me or a coach to create that space to do the excavation, the building? Let's remove that which is not serving you and do more of that which does, and do so in a very systematic and vision-oriented way that creates more of what you want in your life. So coaching with me is 100% specific to everything going on in your world, which is what allows me to have such depth and breadth of everything, because you are the creator and I am the champion for you. Does that make sense?
100%. And something that kept coming to me as you were speaking was the importance of like mentorship. I was telling you, obviously, this podcast is very new to me. It started in June. I'm still developing, I'm still evolving and trying to feel comfortable, of course, on camera. And just having somebody, like you said, from experience, lived experience of how many podcasts that you have developed. You've either been, of course, a co-host, a host yourself. I think that is what's so comforting before we even jumped on this podcast was just a little bit of direction from somebody who has been there and done that kind of puts you at ease as you move forward. Like, okay, you're moving in the right direction. You still have, of course, some improvement, but to have somebody, just like you said, a coach, a mentor, I think could totally help just ease the process as you're beginning anything, not even just, podcast in general. And that leads me, Rob, to the multiple podcasts that you have developed. I would love to get into, it is called Built for the Game. Now, what made you start this particular podcast?
Everything you hear from me is 1 degree away from each other because I'm an entrepreneur coursing through my blood. I'm a coach. I can't not coach. So, Courtney, when you're like, hey, I'm thinking about this, and this, I'm like, oh, I've got experience in all this. I've done this with my eyes closed. Think about this, think about this, think about this. And it's a natural thing. So I have a goal of helping 10 million people. And as part of that, I'd love to create. I truly do. If you could say, what would you do on any given day? Well, I'd definitely create a podcast and video, probably multiple. So like even right now, Courtney, doing this podcast episode with you is the pinnacle of my life. I just love sharing and creating with inspiring people and creating a positive impact in the world. And when I looked at my own development in entrepreneurship, it was equal parts business and personal. So if you were to think about the game of business in the game of life, what do you get to be built for to win for the long haul? Because entrepreneurship is not a fad. It's not something you sort of do. It's like you sort of are or you aren't. There's no like dipping your toe in the water. There's a DNA to who we are as entrepreneurs. So built for the game speaks to the one Lego block or brick at a time for your mindset, your heart set, your personal growth and development, or your brand building, your marketing, your AI, your how do you. And when you combine both of these, it's how to win in business and life for the long haul. So I really just see it as a platform for me to, one, share the lessons learned along my journey, two, share my challenges and things that have been tough for me in this, but also, and here's what I did to overcome this or create this, and you can too. Because so much of social media is very surface level, where we think that everybody's driving Lambos and on private jets. But where is the episode around, like today, I have a 3-year-old child who is homesick from school, and yesterday was Veterans Day, so now we have 2 days in a row as an entrepreneur where my son was at home. But we're going to hear so much about hustle culture of working 18 hours a day, and it's like, well, what about those who have kids who are also business owners, who also have a wife, and it's like, well, what does that look like? Well, cool. Let me pop open the hood and be like, hey, how do you, as you said, Courtney, balance business and life? And this, once again, is why we do the inner work. Because it's the story I'm telling myself, oh my God, I'm not getting enough done today. How in the world can I jump on Courtney's podcast? I haven't been working with the last 2 hours. I've been with a sick child. Versus the reason I'm an entrepreneur is because when my kid gets sick, I can drop everything that I'm doing in a second and I can be there for him, because that's the best version of myself, is to be there for my son. And I can also create an hour to talk to an amazing person where we can help some other people.
Oh, thanks, Rob. And, I think that's so true what you were talking about just with social media. And yes, I think there's much truth to, of course, focusing on the positive that we see all over social media, but then also more of the authentic self of behind the scenes, just like you said, balancing family and what does that look like? And sometimes I feel like we could think that everybody has this like perfect, beautiful life, when in fact we all have challenges we go through and things that arise. And I do believe it's how you react to those situations. And of course, that's where that positivity comes from, at least from my point of view. I feel like the reason I've always been a positive person, but I feel like more recently in my life, I've been more attuned to how I react to things. If there is negativity or I see negativity in my path or my view, how I'm able to reassess and view it in more so of a positive lens. And it reminds me of entrepreneurship, viewing something that, is perceived as a challenge, but how you could view it as an opportunity. And in your case, obviously, you've capitalized on many opportunities. And so I do see how everything weaves together: business, life, the whole positive nature, leadership. And I want to ask you specifically, if somebody is desiring to start a podcast, they're right at the beginning, is there any advice that you could give, or if maybe they've already started it but they're maybe coming up on certain challenges, what words of advice could Rob Cressy bring to them?
Slide into my DMs and DM me. And there's no hyperbole when I say that, because you only have three options.
Mhm.
Number one, figure it out yourself. Number two, hire or buy a course that'll show you what to do. Or number three, hire a coach who's already done it who can help you do that faster. I have as much free stuff that I can give you as humanly possible. If you're thinking about starting a podcast, boom, I'll give you my guide to starting a podcast. If you're someone who's already created it and you're like, hey, I kind of like the idea of building the omnipresent brand where I'm on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube Shorts. Cool. I can help you with that as well. Or, man, I've got a big vision and I just want another champion for me on that. And the reason I say this, aside from being a subject matter expert in this, is because, and Courtney, this is a tip for you in podcasting and building your brand, is there's a silent majority and a vocal minority. So often with creators and brand builders, we say, why is nobody watching? Why am I not getting more likes? Why am I not getting more comments? But the reality is, most people will never let you know they're consuming what you're doing. But that does not mean you're not having a positive impact. And I learned this and it changed my life forever. So it was 7 years ago, and I'm in Miami at Marlins Stadium for Grant Cardone's 10X Growth Conference. And they're like, the event is about to start in 5 minutes. So we're in the concourse of the big stadium, and this guy walks up to me, and he's like, are you Rob Cressy? I was like, yeah, what's up, man? He goes, I love watching your LinkedIn lives. And I was like, what? I was like, you know who I am when you watch these? He's like, yeah, I watch every single one of them. In that moment, for the rest of my life, I will never question, does anybody watch my stuff? Because that guy never told me who he was, but he saw me in a random concourse at an event, which is why I teach silent majority and vocal minority. It doesn't mean that no one's listening, but this is where the big level up is for your answer. If you want to be the best in the world, you will listen when the person on the podcast says, DM me at Rob Cressy on all social media platforms, as I would love to help you. Because guess what? Most people will be like, he won't respond back to me. But guess what? I do. Because very few other people actually take the action. And Courtney, this is such a beautiful representation of this. Because you and I connected on LinkedIn. We did not know each other. And you were like, you were willing to ask, hey, Rob, will you come on my podcast? And I was like, of course. You're all about positivity. I would love to talk with you. And you're sitting there. So, Courtney, pop over the hood for a second. For everybody else listening right now, what was your thought before I responded back to you saying yes? And what was your thought after I said yes?
So I could remember when I did this, before, no doubt, I was nervous to reach out. But once we had, I think it was just like one back and forth, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and ask him if he would be on the podcast. And the worst that could happen is, number one, you ignore me. Number two, you say, no, I'm working on other things. And so I felt like there was not really anything to lose in that moment. And you are such a positive person. And so after that, and obviously being on the podcast, I do, as the podcast goes on, I just feel more comfortable, and I feel just that I know why I started podcasting. I love talking to positive people, uplifting people, and of course, people with the expertise that you have. So, to answer your question, yes, was I nervous? But I also thought there's really nothing to lose, even if you say no. And then afterwards, it's an incredible experience. Just all the advice, Rob.
There you go. So this doesn't have to come from Rob, can come directly from Courtney. So for anybody on any of these journeys, podcasting, building a brand, self-development, AI and Chat GPT, just hit me up, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, at Rob Cressy, that you never know what could happen. Because Courtney, I started a podcast with a guy 10 years ago that I slid into his DMs on Twitter. And I'll actually give you a little secret hack for anybody building a brand. That when I started out in podcasting, I had no experience in the world of sports other than being a super fan who loved to create. So how do you build relationships when no one knows you? Well, you can try and cold DM everybody, especially CEOs and CMOs. Hey, let's talk about sales. And right into the delete box. Or you can say, hey, Courtney, I'm Rob Cressy, and I host a show called Built for the Game. I would love for you to come on my podcast and talk about how amazing you are. Not in those exact words, but that's the subtext of it. And here's the options. Number one, they don't get back to you. You're no worse off. Number two, they already come on podcasts, so they're like, yes, of course, I would love to. Or number three, nobody asks them to come on the podcast, and they're like, oh my God, I'm so honored. And you do not realize how many people would love to come on your show, because guess what? Everybody loves to talk about themselves. So now you're like, wait a second. Are you telling me that podcasting is a Trojan horse for you to build a relationship with anyone that you want? And the answer is 100% yes. And in multiple instances, I brought somebody on my show, we vibed, and at the end of it, they said, Rob, would you ever want to do a podcast together? And I'm like, of course I would. Good thing that I've already been doing this.
That is awesome. And, it brings me to that one point, I must say, about building community. That's what, like, the light bulb went off in my head when I was first starting. I had this idea of talking about life lessons, sport experiences, and career experiences. And I'm like, okay, how do I get that message out? Well, of course, it popped in my head, podcast. But it was this idea of building community and reaching out to people, but also like delivering value too. I mean, just to your point, with storytelling, people telling stories, I think could inspire. I mean, just even from our conversation, I'm so inspired just about entrepreneurship and just, of course, the entrepreneurial journey. But then the power of conversation, getting past the transactional. I mean, I always think about, like, when I go to the grocery store, instead of just going through the motions, but actually asking the person that's checking you out, how is your day going? When do you get off? What are you doing this weekend? I always like to extend that conversation, because recently there was so many times, and I'm actually going to write a blog about this, how I took it one question like more than I would, and you would find out there was so much common ground, and it expanded. And now, like I said, if it's just reconnecting on social media after the interaction, but I think it's so important that we take the time, especially today when we're all in a rush, we all have things to do, but to take time to really get to know somebody. I feel like there's so much value in that.
And Courtney, thank you so very much for that, because that is exactly why we created Unlimited Coach. Because where is the space for other entrepreneurs, coaches, and high-performing people to talk about AI, self-development, and building their brand? Because I know this journey can feel alone, isolating, or you might just say, I want to be around the best and like-minded people who are peers. So we created a community to where we can have shared experiences, where you can talk about, here are my challenges, and someone else can be like, oh, I've been through that, or here's what I'm building. Cool. Have you thought about that? To me, success leaves breadcrumbs, and this is the breadcrumb. I am all in on community building, because in an AI-driven world over the next 10 years, you know it cannot be duplicated in one day: authenticity and community.
Yes. Yes, that is so true. And Rob, you have provided so much incredible advice. But the one thing on this particular podcast I would love to end on is a positive note, very generally speaking, just about life. If you could offer the community, for that matter, just a positive piece of advice.
My positive piece of advice is that I believe in you. On a journey of doing anything great in building your vivid vision or going from a corporate job to being an entrepreneur or even just being the best version of yourself or for your family, that the support of others, as we've talked about, you might not feel it, but I want to let you know that I believe in you. And if at any point in your life or in your journey, you start to doubt yourself, oh man, is this ever going to happen? Know that I've been there and I feel it over the last 12 years. Man, I've lived and known what feeling empty and dark and hollow and alone, and why is this not happening faster? And man, is anybody ever going to do this and that? And just know that there's at least one other person out there that believes in you, because if you keep going and you don't give up, you will make your dream happen. It's true, because when I audited the stats for entrepreneurship, and it was like 80% of businesses are out after 1 or 3 years, and I'm like, all right, how do I not be one of those people? And I was like, what did they do? They gave up. Therefore, I specialize in belief. And if I can specialize in it, I want to transfer it to you. I believe in you that great things are on the horizon.
Rob, thank you so much. Like I said, for being on the podcast, but providing advice and just inspiration. I mean, just from this particular episode, I feel so much more lively. I feel like just more of a positive outlook on what I have started, because there's always ups and downs. Sometimes you wake up just like ready to go, engine roaring, but then the other days it could be like, okay, how do I take that next step forward? How do I muster up more confidence to do that? So I'm just so grateful, like I said, for taking the time to speak on the Plenty of Positivity podcast today, Rob. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.